Naomi, and that's
Joel. And we're finally taking a break from depressing, horrible news or bad books to talk about things we like. Oh my God.
You know what I like? Big
Not-
titty bitches.
I think this is going to set the tone for the episode. Boy, howdy. Boy, howdy. Naomi, today we are getting together to discuss some romantic-related media we actually enjoy.
Crazy.
Oh my God. We have reviewed so many movies, and we hated most of them.
No. You hated most of them. I like movies. You are a pessimistic.
I like movies. I think most movies don't really try, and it's just like Adam Sandler and his friends making money off of vacation while pretending they're creating original content.
There is movies, and then there are good movies.
There's movies, then there's film.
And you shit on every single one of them.
That's not
I'm
true.
like,
I
hey.
like 500 Days of Summer. There we go.
Yeah, you know what? That's one out of like 12 movies that we've looked at.
Listeners, you don't want to hear us bicker. You want to get recommendations. We're going to get right into that. But first, a drink.
What are we drinking today?
New Wave soda. It is tangerine. It is unsweetened soda.
I'm really scared.
With tangerine, pear, lemon.
And there's also caffeine in here.
Oh shit! I
Yeah.
didn't realize that.
It says slightly caffeinated.
Oh, this is bad.
Why would you buy that?
This is like tangerine juice, but then
Ew.
they mix the tangerine juice in like a 1-to-10 water to tangerine
Ew.
juice ratio. It's also got a funk, like from sitting in a can for a while. You're supposed to refrigerate tangerine
The
juice.
aftertaste is like, you know, when you went to like a vegan, like fresh cafe in the early 2000s, and
No,
it
I
was
was like 8 at the time.
and you like drank it and it was like supposed to be fresh juice, but it just tasted awful. That's what that is, but carbonated.
I don't know what you would be like for mid 2000s. The Iraq
Mid-2000s,
War was
I
on, Naomi.
Yeah, the Iraq War
How
is
many
what
vegan restaurants were we going to at that time?
Not a lot, but enough that I remember that taste.
Okay, I'll have to agree. Naomi,
I was just mainly saying that that's the taste that you got from early veganhood.
early veganhood.
Yeah.
Way to throw thousands of years of Hindu history out the door.
That's not what I'm saying. New Western vegan. Sorry, let me rephrase that.
Better. I agree. Yeah. Let's get to the
Yeah.
meat, the hunk of
Yes.
non-vegetarian protein.
But before we do that, I
No.
need to make a confession to our audience.
What?
And everyone's gonna gasp and everyone's gonna be like, no, not you. Audience, I recently got into romance novels.
Oh fuck.
Yeah. And you know what? They're kind of like helping me. Like, life updates coming soon, but they're helping me through this like healing journey that I'm on right now. They're helping me through this like what do I want in my next relationship journey that I'm like thinking about right now. It's really just like, you know, healing a lot of things that I didn't know were broken. Plus, I'm spending a lot less time on screens. I'm spending a lot less time, you know, watching Seinfeld.
The most romantic.
No, because like before I was watching, my comfort shows were How I Met Your Mother and New Girl.
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't have Hulu anymore. I just have Netflix, which by the way, I became a real adult a couple weeks ago because I got my own Netflix account. This is where you gasp and say, oh, no.
This is where I pity you because they've won.
Yeah, they have one.
Yeah.
And you know what? They have Seinfeld, so I'm going through Seinfeld right now.
Oh, God.
I recently just got to the episode in Seinfeld where they start sleeping together. You know,
George and Kramer. Love that episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she kind of like tricks him into dating her, and I was like, that doesn't work.
Damn. Naomi,
Yeah.
when I say media, I don't
Yeah.
just mean movies.
Yeah.
I mean, I got a couple books on here. I got some
Yeah.
anime. This could be a multi-part episode if we wanted to come back to this topic
'Kay.
moving forward.
'Kay.
I got some manga. I got some video games. I want to talk about romance in a lot of different media.
'Kay.
And I think it's important to understand where I'm coming from because my big issue with a lot of romantic content, specifically movies, is they're just so cookie cutter.
Okay.
They follow the same plot notions. There's the same basic stupid misunderstandings where it's like, I was talking to my sister and she thought it was my sexy girlfriend or whatever. And everything, you know, gets screwed up because people can't have real adult human conversations. And often they're really sloppily written where they're not particularly funny or interesting. There's no real special shtick that makes them good. They're just, again, following the same basic template. And I think a large part of this is that so many of them are just written, it seems, almost exclusively by men, where there's no real female voice. There's no real developed perspective for the women characters outside of being like things to pursue. I've seen this new trend where there's a lot of, I think, young adult novels that are being turned into TV series or movies.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because it's now not men going after women and like the woman being a prize. It's the woman thinking her only purpose is to find a relationship and making herself a prize so she can attract attractive men.
To your point, I just heard a quote recently. And if any people out there, men, women, they, thems, everyone out there is thinking that the end goal in your life should be a relationship. I'm not saying it shouldn't be. I heard this great quote, and it was like, stop focusing on who you're going to end up with and start focusing on who you're going to end up as.
Interesting. I think there's another element of this, which is I like a lot of romances where the romance is not the plot. The main driving force is not two people getting together, but rather people end up together through what's going on. And I feel that's a lot more authentic because a lot of relationships are shaped by factors outside of our control.
Joel just likes trauma bonding.
I don't even think it's that. I just mean people spending time together and finding a connection there. But I think it also means it doesn't have to fit cookie cutter notions, and you don't have to do a lot of the same scenes romantic comedies want to do, where it's like meeting the partner and having wacky misunderstandings. You can cut all that out.
Yeah.
You can just presume the audience is smart enough to follow along. I like a lot of media where it's like a background element where you can see a relationship developing, and if the media has multiple seasons or there's like multiple TV or multiple movies that all contribute to something greater, that's awesome. And then one final thing that I have a big issue with romantic media right now is the fact that no one really has sex. And this is important to me, not because I think every movie needs to be sexed up, but because I feel Hollywood is deliberately cutting out opportunities for main characters to have romantic or sexual connections, partially to appeal to like foreign markets, but also partially so that they can market their movie to more audiences, right? You can't have a Marvel movie where like Black Widow and Captain America hook up, because then you can't like have a movie where you can market it to like 8-year-olds, right? You can't have a scene where like two adults who like spend a lot of time together and are like hinted at having a romance in like several of the MCU movies actually get it on.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because everyone wants to treat comic book movies as like the new art form, the new mythology for a modern era, but no one wants to actually create situations or scenarios where like actual adults can relate to those experiences. I think a really good article, which I'm going to link in the description of this episode, is Everyone is Beautiful and No One is Horny. It discusses how movies in like the 1980s had very sexual elements. Like the first Terminator movie, which everyone seems to forget about, had a scene where like the two characters boned down. And that's like an actually really important scene in the plot. But even more than like having important scenes in the plot, I think having casual nudity is good in a lot of films. Not to be like voyeuristic, but rather because like nudity doesn't have to be perverted and like entirely sexualized.
Yeah.
It's good having characters walk around topless like they would at home to demystify this idea that nudity is inherently sexual. And I'm concerned that so much of our media in today's society is attempting to appeal, one, to everyone, and two, to hide the fact that a lot of human relationships involve sex and sexuality. So all this is to say, I think it's important to have lots of different types of romantic media that challenges our notions of, what relationships are. And I think it's important that a wide range of people get to talk about what they think romance is and create media that depicts the things they consider ideal.
I'm going to push back. I just recently finished the Avengers movies. Not all of them. There's a bunch, but like the Endgame and the Infinity War and all that. And yes, I did cry, if you were wondering, during the Endgame. It was my first time seeing it. But I would say that I appreciated the way they depicted romantic relationships. And I'm saying that in such a way that, yes, I understand that they are trying to make it, universally like acceptable. Like, oh, an 8-year-old isn't supposed to see Gwyneth Paltrow's titties or like something like that. But I liked the way that they depicted their relationship between Hulk and what's-her-face.
Oh, I could not disagree more. Black Widow?
Yes, I liked it because it was like, okay, he's going to go and work on himself and he knows that that's not a good relationship for them right now, collectively. I appreciated that because one, that shows that it is possible and there is that people don't need to be in relationships and at every point in their life and that there's room to heal. And two, I appreciated the way that there was still a community and that friends are just as valuable as a romantic partner. You and I discussed this past week. You were like, it would be good if, like, yes, you were in a relationship, but also if, like, you had the community that if you lost that person, your significant other, that you had enough people around you that it wasn't that big of a loss. Like, yes, it sucked, but at the same time, it was like you still had that community that was able to uplift you and support you.
Right. I mean, my big issue with the Hulk Black Widow romance is it's so underwritten. Like, they use the fact these movies come out every 2 to 3 years as an excuse to, like, just not dedicate a lot of time. Where it's like, we're going to spend time apart, and then, oh, they spent time apart, and then they're not together, and we're not going to follow up on what that looked like. But also, Joss Whedon had some really weird writing in Age of Ultron, where Black Widow has one scene where she's talking to Hulk, and she's like, I understand what it means to be a monster. When I was in my special Russia Black Ops sex lady program, they cut out my womb and I can't have children. So I'm kind of like a monster. And it's like, that's a interesting takeaway message, Joss Whedon, that women who can't have kids are just like the Hulk, an entity who gets really mad and murders hundreds of people at a time. I think it's fascinating too, because the MCU's been going on for so long, they've just like cut out a lot of romances. Like they forgot about Natalie Portman for several of the Thor movies.
No, she came back in Endgame.
No, she came back in the most recent Thor film.
She came back in Endgame too.
I don't think
she was in Endgame. I just watched it like 2 days ago. She was there very briefly. She had no lines, but she was present in that movie.
When Hulk was Edward Norton, which is part of the MCU, he was dating Betty Banner, and there was some interesting stuff going on in that film, and then she just vanished from existence. Captain America has had like 4 love interests in the TV series and movies and hasn't really been committed to anyone. And I think part of it is an idea of wanting to be chaste. Part of it is this idea that you want people to be able to jump in and not have to know all the backstory in order to like relate to these characters. But I think also it's like a sense of wish fulfillment where it's like, ladies, you could date Captain America. He's a free agent. He's not committed to anyone.
Yeah.
And in the same way for men, it's like, Black Widow's single. She might go for you if you were to meet Black Widow, in like a alien war zone. She might bang you.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't need to dig too much into this, but I think it's important to emphasize that the majority of money being spent on media right now in the United States is on these giant blockbuster films that lack a sense of continuous romantic development. And I think that's concerning. It's not as though this media doesn't exist. It's that all the studios are pushing towards the equivalent of shoving action figures together in big fight scenes. And I'd like to see a greater variety of romance, romantic types, sexual activity, whatever, portrayed in some manner with the backing of studios.
Okay, let's move on. Let's
talk about
past.
Give me your first piece of favorite good goddamn media.
Okay, I just read Hook, Line, and Sinker. And I really enjoyed it. I got it from Target. I'm not one of those girlies that like has to be on book TikTok in order to it's kind of like Reddit in that way. Like they have different like factions of TikTok. So it's like if you're on book TikTok, you get recommendations on books to read. Okay. And specifically like romantic media. There's like a faction of like romantic media. So I enjoyed this one. Because it was unrealistic, but it also set my expectations higher for what I should expect in relationships.
What is it about?
So it's about this woman, and she's really into music. And so she has some, her stepfather's in the LA entertainment industry, so he's like a big director, producer, or whatever. And so she was like, I'm gonna use his connection to get me a job, but it's gonna be like a personal assistant or something. Like it's not gonna be what I actually want to be, and I just want to like learn the ropes and like work my way up. So she's in this. She wants to be one of those people that like makes scores for movies. And she had met this guy like a while ago, like last summer, and she was like, they were friends, and he was like, well, I've never been friends with a woman before, and she was like, great, because I only want to be friends with you because I have I'm working on this movie right now, and I have this big crush on the director. So the director's like, I don't know if I want to continue to film this film in LA. I want to film it somewhere grungier. And so she's like, I know this town that my dad died in when he was a fisherman in like Washington State. Let's pick up, very unrealistic.
That's the title of the book.
Yeah. Let's pick up and let's move production to this small ass fishing town, which is where her sister is now located because her dad owned this fishing bar, and that's why she spent last summer there and met this guy named Fox, was because like she was fixing up this bar with her sister. And so her sister now owns and operates the bar, and like she's involved with a fisherman who also knows Fox, and Fox and her are living together now because he has this spare room and she needs a place to stay while she's filming this movie.
Got a spare butt for her too.
Yeah, and so they like have these like small romantic moments but nothing serious, and then like he's just a man whore, like straight up, and that's why she doesn't want to get involved with him, is because she's like, I'm not that type of person. And then she finds out that he stopped his man whore ways as soon as he met her because like he couldn't get his mind off her, and then they fall madly in love, and she stops like being having a crush on Sergei, the director, and they finish the film, and he's like, oh my god, she's gonna leave soon, I haven't even told her how I feel about her. And then they get in this big fight, and he's like, I cannot be with you right now because I am really bad at having relationships with women because I can't communicate well because I've always been a man whore. And she was like, fine, get your head out of your ass and figure it out, and I'll give you time to think. And then he's like, oh my god, like the next morning he goes to his mom's and he's like, oh my god, she already left, like blah blah blah, I'm so sad, I'm so in love with her. And come to find out she's still at his apartment. They like, you know, fast forward 10 years and they live in the woods, and they have 3 kids and they have dogs, and they figured it out, and they're so in love. And so that was that book. And I would say it's unrealistic, but at the same time, like it put unrealistic expectations in my head. At the same time, I want someone who only wants me sexually, you know, in a relationship, you know, all those things. So it's like, okay, this is what my expectations should be. Period. End of sentence.
I think our listeners are going to get some tonal whiplash between me being like, fuck generic shit, and then you being like that. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Clearly, we can have different interests, different likes.
Yeah, Joel, I don't have to be a twin of you.
Yeah, but yes, I did not realize how closely some of my criticisms might line up. How would you describe the tone? Is it dramatic, comedic?
I would say a little bit of everything.
Is it smutty?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I feel like if I go into more detail, it's going to be like the episode that we did with Audrey.
Potentially, yeah. I kept it relatively chaste in my description, so we don't have to go there. But of all the books you've read, would you recommend this to other people?
Well, I've only read 2 romantic books so far. And
it's going to be a short episode.
Yeah, exactly. No. I've only read 2. I'm on that new book that everyone like had an issue with. It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, where like they started the movie with Blake Lively and then they had to cancel it because there was so much protest against it. And for some reason, I think it's like there's like abuse in the book, or Colleen Hoover's related to someone who's abusive. I don't know what the controversy is, but I was like, I have to read this book because it's so controversial. I'm going to figure it out for my own. I will come back when I'm done with this book, and I will get back to you about it because I haven't read anything on Reddit about it yet. So I'm waiting until after I like finish this book.
You're on Reddit Talk?
Reddit.
Book Reddit?
Book Reddit.
Book Reddit?
Book Reddit.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk about my first rec.
Good. Do it.
Which is completely different.
Okay.
That is the film Beginners. I think it was released in either 2011 or 2014. And the basic premise is Ewan McGregor plays a sad sack graphic designer who is struggling with relationships ever since his father died several months prior. The movie is not really a straightforward narrative. It kind of cuts back and forth between the present and his last months with his dad.
Okay.
And his dad, who's played by Christopher Plummer, is interesting because he came out as gay during this period.
Okay.
So the movie has Ewan McGregor in the present, and this is set, I think, in the mid-2000s. You have, like, mentions of the Iraq War and other topical things. You know it's a movie set in that period.
Yeah.
And he struggles with relationships because he realizes that his father had been pretending to be in love with his mother throughout his entire childhood.
Yeah.
Even while he was like sneaking off in order to like make out with men in parks.
Yeah.
And his father really leans into his gay identity when he comes out.
Mm-hmm.
And Ewan McGregor isn't like super uncomfortable with gay people. He's uncomfortable with the idea that like he realizes how much of his father is being suppressed, and he's unsure if he could ever commit to someone in a heterosexual relationship because he's afraid of that person doing exactly the same thing to him at some point. So it's a really interesting like topic from that perspective.
Yeah.
And I think it, because it has this like non-linear structure, you have the opportunity to like use elements from the past to directly inform certain scenes. So like something traumatic happens with like him and his dad, and it cuts to the present, and you are like, oh, everything that's happening now in this scene is like dictated by like his memories and occurrences, what's going on there. So that's kind of cool. So in the present, he falls for an actress who's played by the French lady Melanie Laurent. She's this like blonde French actress who was in a number of films in like the 2010s. She was in the Now You See Me films. She was like a French FBI agent or something. I don't know why she was super popular, but she kind of like blew up and then disappeared. But yeah, he's struggling with like the relationship, and they have some really interesting scenes where like they're into each other, but like it's difficult to understand how they're going to bridge the gap between like the fact that she has this career that takes her all over, he has all of these hang-ups, and it's authentic. It's funny. It's a small stakes piece. This is not like the end of the world stakes or anything. It's literally just how does this person reconnect? So it explores, you know, themes of trauma. It explores like what it means to be committed to someone, because it's very clear that like his father was a decent father, besides the fact that like he and his mother weren't, you know, as closely connected as he thought. But again, like, how do you truly understand someone? How do you support them at times like this? There's also this great gag where he has a dog. He adopts his father's dog after his dad passes, and the dog can apparently understand English, but the dog can't talk. So he's just having these like heartwarming scenes where he like expresses all his feelings to the dog, and the dog's just sitting there, and there's subtitles with how the dog's reacting. So that's kind
pretty
of
cute.
Yeah, I think it's helpful seeing people who have realistic concerns and problems portrayed in a way that treats them as meaningful. And yeah, I really like the film. Soundtrack is great. The editing is wonderful. Big plus for me.
My next form of media, romantic media, was something that I watched right before I went to San Diego last time, which was a couple weeks ago. And I enjoyed it, one, because I watched it with my roommate, and it was like a girls' night, and she braided my hair, and I was like, wow, I've never had a female relationship like this before. And two, it was because it was George Clooney and Julia Roberts.
Oh, yeah.
And so this was I love the films from like the early 2000s, the 1990s, of like those rom-coms. Like, we don't have that genre anymore. Like, we have like stupid Netflix films that are put out that are like the new Hallmark films, essentially. So like, I really appreciated this because like, one, it's people that, you know, I really enjoy watching, George Clooney and Julia Roberts. But two, it wasn't necessarily a traditional romantic journey.
Was this... It's not Shotgun Wedding. It's
No.
They're trying to sabotage their, like,
so
daughters.
it's called A Ticket to Paradise.
Okay.
And they were married before, they got divorced pretty early on into their marriage, and they had a daughter together. And they both explained it as like, oh, we just had so much going on, and like we had too many bills, and it was like super stressful being in this relationship, and we're just happier apart. And so they're like acting like they are both, you know, the Grinch, and they're smelly and to each other essentially the entire movie. But they get together and they're like, we need to sabotage this wedding because their daughter just went to law school and she's giving it all up to move to Bali and marry this guy that she's known for like literally like 2 weeks. So they go to Bali and they're like, wow, this is really pretty, because he like lives on a seaweed farm. And I would just watch this movie just for the shots of Bali. Like, it's beautiful. But essentially, he lives on a beach, and the farm is right out, like the seaweed farm is right out on like the shallow parts of the beach.
Why isn't the movie called Eat Seas and Weeds? Keep going.
Eat, Pray, Bali. No,
Yeah.
she was already in Bali for Eat, Pray, Love. And so they get to Bali and they're like, oh my God, like they're trying to sabotage this wedding. A bunch of things go wrong. The groom is smart enough to realize what they're trying to do. And the bride, their daughter, figures it out too. And then everything works out and they're about to leave and they're like, okay, like, you guys have gotten married, like this is beautiful, like you can stay here in Bali, we don't care if you give up your whole law career that we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars putting money into, just be happy and like, you know, live the slow life in Bali. And then as they're leaving, they like realize, like they're on a boat already, they're like, you know, about to leave the island that they're staying on, and they're like, we're gonna stay too. And so they like jump off the boat, and it's like really dramatic, and George Clooney and Julia
Spoiler
Roberts,
alert.
like, yeah. So I don't think in any movie, in any part of the movie, there's like any sexual like things that come up. Like they mention small things like, oh, wear a condom and like stuff like that, which hashtag practice safe sex. But it's never like they had this like giant romantic beautiful kissing scene or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like I think they kiss like once or twice in the entire movie and they're like, you know,
Yeah.
there's not like the grand romantic gesture where someone's running through an airport or something. It was just like, okay, we're still in love, we didn't realize it, this is a better place in our lives where we can actually be in this relationship, and they go with it.
Let's talk about George Clooney and Julia Roberts.
Yeah.
Ocean's films.
Oh yes.
So for our listeners who aren't aware, there was 3 films in the early 2000s called the Ocean's Trilogy. You had Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12, and Ocean's 13.
Yes.
And all of them are cool, sexy, neat heist films.
Yes.
Where a group of robbers, led by Danny Ocean, played by George Clooney, rob various people. And it's all very well plotted. It's cool, sexy people doing cool, sexy things. It's all like really sharp, witty dialogue with some really strong like character work by different people who were all starring in films in the early 2000s. George Clooney in the first film gets out of prison. He was in prison for some reason relating to fraud. And his wife, played by Julia Roberts, has broken up with him and gotten together with a casino mogul at some point in the past. And he decides that he wants to rob the casino of this mogul and puts together a crew to do so. And it isn't until partway through, people are like, wait, shit, are you doing this to get back together with your wife and like pull one over on this dude? And so like the romance is not the center of the movie, but every scene they have together, they just have incredible charisma.
Yeah.
They're both like very deeply into each other, even though she's like kind of moved on. And it's interesting how the plot isn't really about like them getting back together, but he has like a sub-con within the con where he's like trying to set the casino mogul up in a bad light and make him out to be the bad guy, even as he's stealing like $150 million from the dude. Yeah, it is not like a major focus of any of the movies, but every time they're on scene together, it's like really cute and cool. And then like clearly they bond over the fact that both of them enjoy the adrenaline rush of stealing things, because that becomes a plot point in part 2, Ocean's 12.
I really liked their chemistry in those movies just because it really showed like you should be with someone that you actually like spending time with.
Yeah, and I like there's that scene in Ocean's 12 where they've just been told that this master criminal they're up against has like successively stolen a piece of art they were trying to steal. Mm-hmm. And George Clooney and Julia Roberts invite themselves over to his estate and are waiting for him when he comes home.
Yeah.
And they're just like laughing and giggling as they like drink his wine on his patio. And he comes up and he's like, I've beaten you, ha ha ha. And they're like, yeah, you're the greatest. Awesome. Tell us how you did it. Mm-hmm. And they just have this fun scene where they're like cutting in and interjecting and being rude as he's like explaining his like master plan and all of that. And both of them are like really interested in like the art and like high tech nature of his like con. And I don't know, it's fun bonding. But yeah, like I think they're both people who enjoy spending time with each other. I think one of the big issues I see a lot, and even cookie cutter or even like comprehensive romantic comedies, is that the actors seem like they just rolled out of their trailers. Yeah. I like it when they spend a couple of weeks together. I think that's something that Zooey Deschanel and Joseph Gordon-Levitt did before 500 Days of Summer. They spent like 3 weeks together just like hanging out. I think they shared an apartment or something. But the idea was you're more likely to have genuine chemistry with someone you care about.
Yeah.
Like acting can do part of the work, but there's little touches, little flourishes that you only really get if you feel comfortable with someone.
Yeah.
That's important to underline.
I think that it's also like something that isn't necessarily talked about a lot is like the fact that in these like in romantic media, you see a lot of people fighting. And I recently heard something from a therapist, couples therapist, talking about the fact that you should not be fighting with your partner in the first 3 months of the relationship. Basically, what this therapist was saying is you shouldn't be having these big fights where you break up in the first 3 months. That's not a good way to start a relationship. It's not a good way to let the person know that you're going to be sticking around for a while. So in that fact, you see all these Hallmark movies, you see all these movies where they're trying to give a genuine, human reaction where they have a big fight and there's a big fallout and blah blah blah. I get it. Couples fight. They're trying to portray the couples fight. But you should not be doing that in the first 3 months of a relationship.
I think part of the problem is because movies are expected to be 2 hours, you have to compress a lot of time.
Yeah.
And either films portray a relationship over a period of a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
or they attempt to portray it over a longer period, but don't provide clear indications that time is changing. One good example would be Silver Linings Playbook, where allegedly it's happening over multiple months, but there's barely any change to the setting or the scene. There's no snow on the ground or leaves changing color when they're outside. So it feels like it just happened in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And I think that only amplifies the fact that these people don't get along. If there was some kind of temporal element where it was clear that, okay, they get along for the most part, but once in a while, they get into a fight, maybe once a month, that would be one thing. But instead the effect is these people are screaming at each other basically every single day, and they ended up together at the end.
Yep.
Happy ending.
Passion. It's called passion.
It's called fire.
You want it in the relationship.
Salsa.
The only thing that matters, it's not love, it's not communication, it's not healthy growth, it's passion.
Picante.
You go first though.
I can go now?
Yeah, go.
Oh man, I want to talk about my embarrassing media.
Yeah,
That's great.
do it.
So let's talk about anime and manga.
Okay.
So I want to recommend Full Metal Alchemist. It is a long-running manga comic series about a fantasy kingdom full of alchemists, people who can manipulate elemental forces and rapidly build things, or penetrate the future of the universe, or create alchemical monstrosities by fusing creatures together. But mostly they just commit war crimes for the government. It's great. It's a wonderful series. So it follows two brothers who are the youngest alchemists ever to join the ranks of the country's military and their adventures trying to find the legendary Philosopher's Stone. It discusses loss and war crimes and militarism and overcoming disabilities, finding purpose through grief, and all big adult themes. That said, it's also really super funny and heartwarming and has really, really likable developed characters. Now, one of the reasons I think that's the case is because the author, Hiromo Arakawa, is a woman. And I only bring that up because all the female characters are really well developed and don't lean into a lot of manga tropes. You have multiple characters who are top-notch sharpshooters, mechanics, fighters, or strategists. And because the principles of the world allow you to use alchemy to fight, that means there's not really a gender difference in fights. So people are on pretty equal basis there. There's a wide range of body types and racial groups in the cast, which feels super different from all the other mangas where it's generic white or Asian people. And it develops this really interesting world of cultures and groups. Now I bring this up because there's a very cute relationship between one of the brothers, Edward, and his childhood friend Winry, who serves as the main character, serves as the main mechanic for his prosthetic limbs. The relationship doesn't feel forced. It develops naturally, and she's also a really well-developed character who's not just a prize for doing a good job, and she's rather just a well-developed person who wants a relationship just as much as he does. That said, she does beat him with a wrench when he causes damage to her prosthetics, so I don't think that's necessarily the most positive, wholesome relationship, but I think the positives outweigh the negatives. It's a really nice series, a really nicely developed relationship. That's not the only one in the series, but I'd say it's one of the main relationships in the plot, and I definitely recommend it. That said, do be careful because the manga series, the printed comic series, is fine, it's great, but they've done 2 anime adaptations. The first anime adaptation was done in the early 2000s, and this was done before the main manga comic series was done. Ooh. I have not seen it, but what it means is the creators of that had to come up with their own ending for it. So their ending has this wonderful fantasy world that follows the comics, and then halfway through, one of the main characters gets sucked up into World War II Germany.
What?
He travels through a time portal and has to work with the Nazis to develop the technology to get home. And that's a very, very weird way to take the series. The other is a much more faithful adaptation. But I do have the strong opinion that English dubbed anime is kind of garbage. So do listen to the Japanese dubbing, which is very, very strong. But yes, Full Metal Alchemist. Strong recommend on Joel's part. What do you got?
Well, I am kind of confused about your piece of media, so I'm going to comment on it. I was our father is a big fan of Game of Thrones, or he was,
Yes.
like when Game of Thrones was still like a thing, and before they had that awful.
What are you talking about? Game of Thrones had 5 seasons. That was it.
And the awful ending that Dad was like very mad about. Yeah. But when he was talking about it, he was like, I'm never going to read the books because I've heard that the books have all these like side quests, which is basically just like the author went on these like really intricate like side stories and never really finished them up. And that hole in the story where the character just gets looped into World War II it reminded me of that.
Well, again, that's the early 2000s anime adaptation, the first one. The actual manga has been finished. It has a very satisfying ending.
Yeah, but it's still weird.
There's a lot of side plots. You're like, oh man, the fan fiction version of it exists, so I can't enjoy the rest of the media. Naomi, tell me about things you like.
So, okay, I know that we already talked about this on the podcast, but I really enjoyed it. My whatever number of media this is, let's just say it's my fourth, fifth, whatever, is You People. And we talked about this on the podcast.
Oh, God.
And I liked it. I liked the movie. I liked the way that it went about it. I like, what is his name? Jonah Hill. There we go.
Jonah Hill.
I like Jonah Hill. I don't like him in everything, but I like him. I liked him in War Dogs too. That was a good piece of media. I didn't necessarily like the way that the ending was, but you know, I think it would have been just fine if they just ended with like, okay, some families just don't get along. And I would have been satisfied with that. I don't think they needed the ending that it had, but we've already talked about this on the podcast, so I'm going to move on to my next piece.
It feels very much like a COVID production. Well, let me jump in.
Yeah.
Because if we're talking about Jonah Hill,
yeah, go ahead.
Have you seen Netflix's Maniac?
Okay, I've heard really, really good things about it from my friend who I work with. And he was like, this is my like binge show.
So like a lot of Netflix things, it's one season because they don't like perpetuating good things. It's a self-contained story. It doesn't need multiple seasons. The basic summation is it's not really a romantic piece of media, but it has like all the trappings of it and is able to explore a lot of ideas within that space. So it's set in this like kind of retro future, like approximately early 2000s, but like all of our technology is like kind of antiquated, similar to like 1970s stuff. Jonah Hill is the son of this like really wealthy, powerful family in New York, and he suffers from like serious anxiety and I think depression. And part of like that stems from the fact that his brother has just been accused of sexually assaulting one of the employees at this like family's company. And Jonah Hill is supposed to testify in the trial and say his brother was with him all night the time this incident occurred.
And who's pressuring him to say this? The brother or the okay?
Yeah, the whole family is like, you know, it would be really bad if like this young woman were to take advantage of us like this, and you know, other bullshit rich people say.
Yeah.
So he's like messed up in that regard. And Emma Stone is another person in this world who I don't really recall what she's doing when she first starts the series, but she's like addicted to a drug that one of her friends has managed to obtain for her from a clinical drug trial. Okay. And she decides to break into that drug trial by pretending to be one of the members and blackmailing one of the people who like decides who gets in. So both of them apply for it, both of them get in, and the drug trial involves exposing them to a series of substances and then like putting them in VR simulations in order to have them work through a lot of their anxieties.
Okay.
But something goes wrong with the software, and both Emma Stone and Jonah Hill's VR simulations get fused together. So they're stuck together in this like series of weird VR hijink adventures. Okay. So the reason I say it has like the trappings of romantic stuff is like they get very close throughout the series, but also, it's not really like they're in a relationship per se. It's that the VR simulations have them being like a husband and wife repeatedly, or like boyfriend and girlfriend. There's one where like they're both thieves in like this 1920s world where magic exists. There's one where they're just normal like husband and wife in the 1990s and have to like break into a jewelry store. There's one in which, I'm struggling to remember all these different scenarios. There's one in which Emma Stone is this like fantasy elf who's exploring this world looking for a mystical treasure.
So every new episode is like a different fantasy, or like
I don't recall if
like
every episode is a specific one, but yeah, they are kind of isolated. They finish up one story and go to others.
Is it kind of like Inception where like one thing will cause a chain reaction? reaction
Little
to
bit.
like, okay.
So there's a couple of issues that pop up in the series. The first is like Emma Stone is apparently overcoming the death of her sister. Like her sister died in this like horribly tragic accident. And one of the things they explore throughout the series is how you overcome like people just vanishing from your life and you not having the opportunity to like say the things you wanted to say to them. And so it's really helpful having this like VR fantasy thing where she can depict her sister and like have these conversations, which is an interesting idea.
Yeah.
And I think therapy in the real world would probably explore something similar in a couple of years. But the other thing is the experiment goes horribly wrong because they should not have their brains fused together like this. And so, you know, there's a lot of background drama and trying to explore why this happened and why, despite, you know, the best efforts of the researchers, they continue to create these elaborate mindscapes where they both drawn to each other. So it's an interesting exploration of mental health. It's very prettily shot. Storylines are interesting and engaging. And I think it's just, again, one of those weird things that Netflix has done where they're like, we're going to cancel everything that like doesn't make $1 trillion after its first week, but also we're going to finance some of the weirdest, like most provocative stuff for a single season and just see what happens.
Yeah.
What were you going to talk about?
I was going to talk about, I guess I really just haven't talked about this on the podcast yet. Naomi is now single. So I don't know why I just talked about myself in the third person.
That is my favorite romantic novel.
No, I was just, you know, updating my relationship status. We'll get more into this like when we do updates on our lives in a couple episodes. But I was kind of, you know, in the mood where I was like, I need like something inspiring. I need something that's like gonna get me out of a rut. Because like when you are in a breakup, in any sort of breakup, you lose like a bit of confidence. And I wouldn't say it was because like you got broken up with or you broke up with someone. It was just like you were in a relationship and now you're not, and like you kind of like you're kind of in a rut in a sense.
You don't believe in love anymore.
No, I wouldn't say that. I definitely still believe in love. It's just like it sucks. Like it was a sucky thing that happened.
Sure.
And so I was on Netflix and I was reminded because I watched this movie a couple years ago, but then I rewatched it recently. It's called Someone Great. And it has the woman, if anyone watched Jane the Virgin, it has that woman, Gina Rodriguez. And she's the main character and she just got broken up with by her now ex named Nate. And it's basically just like walking through the stages of a breakup. It's like essentially just walking through the stages of grief. It like talks about, we talked about this recently, like having, I think earlier in this episode, we talked about like having that support system after you break up with someone or after someone in your life dies, like your significant other. And so she has this like really great group of friends that are there to support her and like be there for her during this breakup. And so she's going through the motions. She's not like, you know, work is off and her life is just out of whack because she was just in this long-term relationship. And she's like healing through this process. And so it's like a really great way of depicting like independence as well as, you know, like female friendship and like actually supporting like other women and, you know, like things like that. And so I really enjoyed the movie because I was like, wow, this is like really inspirational because like when, you know, one person leaves your life, you like kind of have to, someone influential in your life, people have to take that place. Like you can't just like lose that person. Like that's not like that, you need to replace that person in a sense. So I really enjoyed it.
What was it called again?
Someone Great.
Someone Great.
Yes. And at the very end of the movie, she actually runs into her ex again. And you would think like, oh, like, she's still kind of sad from the breakup, obviously, because like they were very much in love. But she runs into him and you're like, oh my God, they're going to get back together. Like this is how the movie's going to end. No, they do not, which I enjoyed about the movie because usually in like, you know, there's a happy ending at the end of the movie. And the happy ending was Gina Rodriguez's character, like getting her happy ending by becoming independent and like finding the wrong in the relationship. And like, you know how like rose colored glasses, like no matter how long you've been in a relationship, you look past things because like, you know, you just love that person. You're like, I can deal with these things long term.
It's interesting that you mentioned that phrase, rose-colored, rose-tinted glasses, because I was actually going to bring that up when I talked about BoJack Horseman. So, have you seen any of BoJack Horseman?
I think I've watched a couple episodes from like the first season.
Oh, so that's the problem.
Is it kind of like Seinfeld, where it's like it doesn't get good until the second season?
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
I would not call the first season bad. Like the first season is still like really sharp, prescient humor, but every season of the 6-season series gets better. And part of it is like because it has like really strong characters, it's able to develop them and take them in really interesting directions. But like I would say also it's really interesting how the writing gets increasingly sharper and like goes from being kind of almost like Family Guy skits at times where they're like, this thing happened, and then there's a cut to like some ridiculous thing happening.
Yeah.
To being like really concrete jokes and just a lot of like animal puns.
Yeah.
So we'll circle back to that like rose tinted glasses thing in a second. But for our people who aren't aware, BoJack Horseman is a 6-season animated Netflix show about a washed up Hollywood actor dealing with depression and a search for meaning after not doing anything important with his life for the last few years. Basically, he used to be a sitcom actor in a popular sitcom called Horsing Around, where he, a horse, was like mentoring a bunch of children. And he's kind of ridden on the success of that for years and not done anything he actually wanted to do, such as starring in his film adaptation of Secretariat. He's done a couple personal projects, but nothing like he considers important. So it's an interesting show, both because it treads over the familiar ground of like Hollywood writing, angsty existential pieces about how difficult being an actor is. Like one thing Hollywood loves to do is write pieces about how difficult it is to be in Hollywood. But I find it makes those themes really fresh and relevant. It really does a good job of humanizing these people and making it clear like the problems they possess can be mapped on to other people, even if they're not like big shot TV stars or whatever.
Yeah.
Also, it's really surprising because it survived 6 seasons on Netflix, which loves canceling shows, as we've discussed. Now, the show also depicts most of the characters as anthropomorphized animals. Like, they're effectively meant to be humans, but it also gives an opportunity to insert more animal puns and visual gags than any other series that I've seen. So the show is really a solid look at depression and trauma and the downsides of the glamorized Hollywood life, but there are also multiple romantic subplots. And it solves so many of the problems I have with TV and movie romantic subplots. It's 6 seasons. And this allows each season to develop and explore the relationships of people over multiple episodes. One of my biggest complaints is how 2-hour movies feel so compressed when you're like exploring a romance. Like it's very difficult to like quickly summarize the background people have, give the audience like an inclination of why they fell in love, develop drama and plots. Like, oh, there's a misunderstanding. So like they have to rely upon like comical misunderstandings where like someone misunderstands something that they shouldn't have, and so now as soon as you can correct that, the problem goes away. That's not really how relationships work in real life.
No.
Like often relationships, as we've discussed, have much more central tensions. Like, do you want to have kids? Or like, how do you handle money? Or, like, how do we handle household chores? And so that's why it seems a lot more real to have it in a TV series where you can develop these ideas and show examples of it over time. It also does the thing I really like seeing in media where 2 characters in a relationship realize they're not right for each other, and one decides to take time off from dating to figure out like what they need to work on rather than jumping around to another relationship. Often it's like, we have a TV series and all of our actors are super popular, so now that 2 of them have broken up, we can have that person date another of the actors on this popular TV series. It's the Friends effect, right?
Yeah.
Everyone on Friends dates everyone on Friends. Not necessarily because it makes sense, but because like
they don't want to introduce
close proximity
people,
and they don't want to hire another
Yeah.
actor. So yeah, it does a really good job of actually bringing in new characters as the series develops, bringing in new romantic interests for different characters that feel wholly realized and appeal to different parts of their personalities. I've talked about like a couple of examples of like the romances before on this podcast. One of them is between a writer, Diane, and another former television star called Mr. Peanut Butter, who's a dog. It's hilarious. It's a great bit. But both of them have a lot of affection for each other. Mr. Peanut Butter is significantly more outgoing, and Diane is much more introverted. And a big tension in their relationship is his desire to turn everything into like a TV show and marketable and put it on Instagram and like have very public romantic displays of affection, while she, you know, is perfectly happy having these like very small scale intimate things just for the 2 of them.
Yeah.
And so that's actually one of the reasons they break up partway through the series, is because he wants to like celebrate her birthday party in such a lavish fashion and like gives her all these like really expensive opulent gifts, and she's like, no, I wanted this to be an intimate thing. And they have this like fundamental difference between how they like respect each other and how they think about love.
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, like a really, really interesting tension. The main character, BoJack Horseman, played by Will Arnett, he has a number of different like flings with women throughout the series, and each of them kind of accompany and enhance different aspects. And returning to this rose-tinted glasses comment, at one point he's dating this executive who runs, I think, a media company at some level, and they break up because I think there's a fundamental difference in how quickly they want their relationship to proceed and the things they each individually care about. But she gives this comment, which I think is very prescient, and now I see on like Instagram blogs everywhere, where it's like, if you look back on a relationship through rose-tinted glasses, sometimes all the red flags just look like flags.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting comment. It's a little trite, but yeah, it's like, it's easy to ignore the negative aspects of someone's behavior when you have such like an idealized look at them.
Yeah.
And you have to, kind of step back and take a whole look perspective at who they are before you assess, is this someone I want to continue keeping in my life?
Yeah. And it's not even just that. It's like, okay, if I heard this great advice the other day, it was like, you really don't know if you're truly in love with someone if like the small things that annoy you, if you like look at them and you're like, okay, could I live with this for the rest of my life? Like if, let's just say they never put their socks in the hamper. Okay, can I live with this for the rest of my life, or is this a deal breaker? You know what
Bastards. I mean? They go in the hamper, not on the floor. So yeah, the show really solid. I mean, outside of like all these interesting romantic subplots, is really good representation. One of the characters comes out as asexual partway through the series, and the show both treats it as like completely normal and uses it to reframe key aspects of the characters, which were only hinted at in prior seasons. Pretty much any clip of the series on YouTube has dozens of people commenting about how they realized they were depressed or gay or asexual by watching this and seeing people confront the exact same issues that they themselves like confronted. So that's like really kind of heartwarming. That said, like, I really like the show, but I think it's a very mature show because it grapples with a lot of painful issues like abusive parents, depression, trauma, harassment, racism, etc. It does so in like a very respectful way, and often like is both able to do so respectfully while also making a lot of jokes about the issue in a way that's like genuinely funny. But it's also probably not the greatest thing to watch if you're easily triggered by depression or anxiety depictions. Like, I would strongly recommend it to people, but like, be in a good headspace. Don't come in and be like, this is gonna fix all my anxiety and depression.
It's kind of like watching 13 Reasons Why.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's one of Naomi's favorite romantic shows.
No.
But yeah, BoJack Horseman.
Okay. Awesome. So I watched, this was like earlier this year, but like it's a piece of romantic media that I need to comment on. So last year, around like the last fall, there was like an article that came out in Vogue that was talking about like the new rise, like a rise in rom-coms. Like we talked about this recently, like talking about the fact that there hasn't been rom-coms. Like, there hasn't been rom-coms in a while. Like, that's an early 2000s, late 90s thing.
It's interesting because, as we're recording this, I think there's a Jennifer Lawrence rom-com, Hard Feelings, which just came out. And it's doing okay, but it seems a lot of people are just like, she appears nude in it, I'm gonna go see it for that reason. Not like, oh, I'm actually interested in rom-coms.
Well, it was like early 2000s, 90s things. Like, you have Pretty Woman, you have like I wouldn't even say Nicholas Sparks
movies. Oh, you're talking about the movie Pretty Woman, and I was just like, I thought she was describing plot elements.
No,
Pretty Woman, good, okay, schlub man.
No, I was just like naming rom-coms, but like cool. I wouldn't even call that a rom-com, but like, all the rom-coms that were in the early 2000s, late 90s. And so they tried to rehabilitate this trend. And they came out with the movie Your Place or Mine, which has Ashton Kutcher and
Mila Kunis.
No, Ashton Kutcher and what is her name? The blonde bitch. I'm trying to think of this person right now.
The blonde
Reese
bitch.
Witherspoon.
As also known as
the blonde bitch. So they're long distance friends. They tried hooking up once. It didn't work out. They've been friends for 20 years or whatever. Ashton Kutcher lives in New York. Reese Witherspoon lives in LA. They're, trying to figure out their life. Reese Witherspoon is like, oh, I'm coming to visit you in New York. She has a kid. She's like recently divorced because she's coming to visit him in New York because she has like a class out there.
Like a kid. Yeah, that's why you divorce people.
No, she has a class and it's going to further her career. So she goes and stays out there for 3 weeks or something to like take this class and get the credits and further her career. So she has childcare set up, and at the last minute it falls through and she's like, I can't come visit you. And Ashton's like, no, just like, let me take care of your kid for a couple weeks and you can come out and stay at my place and we'll just switch coasts essentially. And so Reese Witherspoon is obviously like, I don't really, but you know how movies are. I'm obviously going to, she's like,
the thing has to happen.
Yeah, the thing has to happen. So they switch places. They don't run into each other. And they end up like, realizing that they're in love and they end up together. I'm skipping a lot of parts because I really just,
I was gonna say that's a short film.
There really wasn't much to say in the middle. So here's the thing that I have an issue with. First of all, they don't look the age that they are, which is, common in...
Yeah. Well, are they supposed to be in like their 30s? It sounds like their 30s, 40s.
Yeah, 30s, 40s. And they look their age, which
No,
they're in their 40s, but like they look older because like the screen adds like 10 years, I think, on them. Like,
I was going to say, Ashton Kutcher to me always will look like a high schooler because like he was depicted as a high schooler.
Yeah.
That's what I associate him with. I know that he is much older than a high schooler in my rational brain, but I see Ashton Kutcher and I'm like, oh, he's playing like a 16-year-old.
I love how you're calling him Aston Kutcher, but it's Ashton Kutcher. And then now I'm just going to say Aston because he's an ass.
I was thinking Aston. like a real
Aston
British
Martin?
gentleman.
Oh.
Ashton Kutcher, Master Aston.
So I didn't like it, and I'm only bringing this up because like I'm a sucker for a good rom-com.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like this movie because there was no effort. It was kind of like that movie with J-Lo and Owen Wilson.
I thought this was media we liked.
No, I know, but I'm going over it because I was like, I need to talk about it. What was that movie called? The movie with
Marry Me.
Marry Me, yeah. It felt like that because there was literally no plot. It was just like, oh, they fell in love at the end.
I'm trying to think of like rom-coms that I enjoy, and we've sort of brought this up before. I think it might have been in the Marry Me episode, but Nacho Libre.
Oh, such a
and
good
Nacho
movie.
Libre isn't really a rom-com, but it was like released in the same period. It's Jack Black. It follows a lot of like the same like Jack Black movie tropes.
Yeah.
And it's not really about like love. It's more about following your passion, and if you like commit to the things you like, you'll do a good job at them. Which is not like necessarily a realistic message, but it's definitely a like nice one. It's very much like, sometimes you just need a movie to wash off all the gunk and the filth of the world, and that's it. But yeah, he's trying to fall in love with Anne Hathaway, was it? Anne Hathaway is like a sexy new nun who comes to his like Mexican church, and he's like, I will seduce the adorable nun, which is very funny because like he's supposed to be like a religious person. I don't remember if he's a priest or if he's just like an altar boy or something in the movie.
It's definitely not Anne Hathaway.
Is it not Anne Hathaway?
It's Ana de la Reguera.
Oh, that's very funny.
Yeah.
I've been for years. I've been thinking, did they just like bring in Anna Hathaway and have her pretending to be a Latina woman? Like it's a fine movie. It's I would say probably the most inoffensive movie you can see. It probably was rated like PG. It wasn't particularly like graphic or gross or anything.
Kind of like School Rock.
Yeah. But no, it's Jack Black delivering like a solid comedic performance. It has like a really good soundtrack. There's a really, really powerful emotional ending scene where he decides to become a luchador in order to impress his Anne Hathaway Latina love of his life.
It's not Anne Hathaway.
Well, okay, you're watching Ashton Kutcher. I'm watching Ashton Kutcher. It's the same way a lot of people see like the actual actress, and I'm just like Latina Anne Hathaway.
I would like to mention that when I looked up Nacho Libre in order to find the cast to correct you on this, you know the little search bar on Google where it's like people also ask, and one of them is, does Nacho Libre mean free nachos?
I would say we should probably wrap this up soon and come back and have like some romantic comedies we actually enjoyed. I would say there are many that I'm like heavily critical of and I'm still like, yeah, it was fine.
Yeah.
And I think we can probably find some of them. I do want to wrap up on one piece of media that I think is worth bringing up, because one of my complaints at the beginning of this episode was how like sexless so much of modern media is.
Joel just wants to watch porn.
That's it. No, I want to talk about the piece of media, the comic Sex Criminals. Have you heard anything about it?
No, nothing.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So Sex Criminals is a New York Times critically acclaimed bestseller comic series that ran for 69 issues
69
in the 2010s, I believe. It received like really positive critical acclaim from like all the major publications, which is interesting because it's like a very raunchy comic series.
Yeah.
The basic 100-foot level view of the comic is that it's about people who can stop time when they orgasm. And so they use this power to have sex and then rob banks.
Is it specific people?
Yes.
Is it like how some women can squirt?
Yes, it's pretty much exactly like that.
Got it. Okay.
So they use this power to rob banks. And why do they rob banks? Because one of them works for a library that's being foreclosed upon by a bank, and they feel justified in stealing the money back to save it from demolition or development. Which, hey, I totally endorse that.
Yeah.
So along the way, they run into other people who have superpowers related to sexual expression and identity, and quickly realize that there's a much deeper balance of power in their city that's interested in preserving the status quo. But like, the series really isn't about a bunch of superpowered sexual deviants having sex and like committing crimes. That's the plot. But the deeper message of the book is that people should feel comfortable in their sexual identity. And it's not weird to find out new stuff about what you're attracted to or comfortable with. There's this really, really good protracted attempt throughout the series to humanize sex workers. Like there's a former porn star who becomes a college professor who's like a big source of like knowledge and insight.
I love when that happens.
Yeah, I thought that was good. There's a really good attempt to humanize people with mental illness and people with hangups, like sexual proclivities and whatnot they don't really like. It recognizes all of them as valid and worthy of love and compassion, which I'm like, okay, that's really cool. I think there's also a really funny defense of the absolutely absurd concept of sex-based superpowers. Like, it seems completely random, but halfway through the series, that professor is giving a lecture, and she talks about, in this lecture, how a lot of people until recently didn't believe the orgasm or the G-spot existed, and how there's been, like, these fights throughout time for the medical establishment to recognize the validity of like human sexual experience. And the point she's making is like there could still be a lot of things about sex we don't fully understand, experiences people are too embarrassed or ashamed to like talk about. And that's one of the things that comes up in the first volume, because one of the main characters is this woman who runs a library, and she first discovers she can stop time when she orgasms when she's like 13 years old, like in the bathtub. And so she immediately goes around to all of like the bitchy girls at school, because she's like, those are the people who understand sex. And she's like, isn't it weird how like when you orgasm, like time stops? And they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? So they have a lot of fun with that, which I think is interesting. But like a lot of that is background stuff. The main plot kicks ass too. The two main characters are really well developed. The writing is super strong, consistently funny. The artist shoves in a bunch of background gags. I forget who the artist is, but both he and the writer, Chip Zdarsky, have done a lot of work because of their success on Sex Criminals. Like they've worked, I think, on Batman and Daredevil and Spider-Man now. Like they're getting very popular because of the strength of their writing. So I would say like go find it at your local library. Support libraries. That's one of the themes of the plot. Now, this is like kind of obvious. I don't think we have a lot of young listeners, but I do want to note like there's a lot of sex in this comic. There's nudity and penetration and all that stuff. I would say like basically none of it is meant to be titillating. Like you can find the characters attractive, but like pretty much any scene is like we're having sex in order to deepen our relationship or activate our superpowers, like break into banks. A lot of it is like there just to establish like the intensity of the relationship. Some of it is just there to better represent different groups, and they like have depictions of gay people and lesbians getting it on and other stuff. And like the BoJack Horseman series, there's a letter section at the end of the comic, and pretty much every single section would have a bunch of people writing in and being like, I had never realized that like other people shared my proclivities or other people were asexual. And this comic, by like depicting people who had exactly these attributes, allowed me to better understand that I was like totally normal. So that's like really cool. But yeah, Sex Criminals is my recommendation. It's a solid piece of romantic media. It's also like a solid plot. It's also like a solid analysis of like sexuality. And yeah, go get a copy and then get it on.
Okay. With the book?
With the book.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Wear a condom.
Wear a condom. Naomi.
Yeah.
We've actually discussed things we enjoyed.
Yeah.
Besides Ashton Kutcher films. Fuck Ashton Kutcher. All my homies hate Ashton Kutcher. That's not true. Ashton Kutcher, you're fine. I don't have a lot of issues with you. Do you feel like a weight has been removed from this podcast? I think we'll return to this.
Yeah, I definitely think that we should do a part 2 to this episode.
Okay. And we definitely won't record it immediately after we finish this session.
Absolutely not, no.
Okay, good, because we're professionals. And every week we record.
Yeah.
Like 15 minutes before we drop it on Monday morning.
Yeah.
Because that's what our listeners demand of us.
Yeah.
They're a trying people.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for tuning in, people. If you have like really favorite pieces of romantic media, please feel free to pass them along to our email at datetheseguys@gmail.com. We haven't seen everything out there. Obviously, there's a lot of different things from different cultures, different backgrounds. There's very good movies out there. There's a lot of Hollywood stuff you have to filter through. So yeah, if you have recommendations you think we'd enjoy and that other people should know about, let us know, and we might discuss it on the podcast at some point in the future. datetheseguys@gmail.com.
Woot woot.
Woot woot indeed. Smell you later.
Bye.
We have many thanks for the use of our theme music, which is the song Drop by Ketsa. You can find more of their music online at ketsa.uk. You can also find Date These Guys online on Twitter and Instagram at @DateTheseGuys or visit datetheseguys.org. If you have questions for the podcast or want to be a wealthy sugar parent, please send an email to datetheseguys@gmail.com. If you'd like to support our work, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/datetheseguys. We have behind-the-scenes information, early episode access, participation in polls, and exclusive access to a guy sibling map of date ideas for the Arizona area. Since the world sucks right now, we are currently donating all Patreon proceeds to trans organizations like the Trevor Project, a trans suicide prevention organization, and moving assistance funds for those fleeing states outlawing their very existence. Please consider becoming a member and supporting our work today.